And all I could think was, oh my gosh, this is like a punishment for something I never did wrong. What a cruel, cruel, cruel thing to hear other new moms with their babies. And mine is in intensive care and I can't even hold him.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. Today is episode number 51. Today is Thursday, April 14th, an absolutely beautiful day here in Phoenix, Arizona. I am also breathing a lot easier, and I'm quite the relaxed mommy. My son Jesse has been in Greece for over a week, and while he is perfectly capable of taking care of himself, my mommy heart and mind just cannot fully relax until he gets back home. I'm glad he enjoyed himself, but I'm also glad he's back in Iowa now, ready to finish the last 6 weeks of medical school. And today, I am releasing part 2 of Christine's interview. While this show is all about breastfeeding, Christine's first birth story clearly illustrates to all of us how the birth experience impacts our breastfeeding experience. Being a new mother, this is not something that Christine took into consideration. Just because you don't know what you don't know. She expected everything to be fairly easy with breastfeeding the first time around, and then she ran into a few glitches. She had a difficult birth. And now, in today's show, she tells us that now she feels she has this whole breastfeeding thing figured out and knows what to do for the second time around. And certainly, for enough mothers, this is true. And when the birth is life-changing but not traumatic, this is usually true. However, if you've had a difficult birth with some heavy-duty emotional trauma, it is not uncommon for early breastfeeding to be a struggle. And this is exactly what happened with her son, Paul. Now with Christine, I hit the trifecta. A New Yorker who loves to talk and a Mother Center member. I was doomed. No. I really mean that I was in heaven. I had a blast spending this time with Christine, and I just know that you're going to learn so much from her. Whatever you're doing, whether it's sitting back and relaxing, going out for a walk while listening to this, maybe you're at the gym working out, driving in the car, flying on a plane, or nursing your baby. I hope you enjoy the show. And also remember to go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcasts to listen to part 1 if you missed it and to catch up on shows that you might have missed. Let's get started with the show. What is one thing that you would like for other mothers to know about your breastfeeding experience that you would love to be able to change and make better for them?
I think if I actually share the story about my son's birth, that may actually help answer that question. Everything about his delivery was completely different from the first time, which I thought would have been great. Then things went wrong completely differently. So I thought, oh my goodness, here we are again. My world has been rocked. So my son is Paul, and he came a week early. My water broke, which, of course, having never gone into labor the first time, I didn't even know my body was capable of that. So that was the first surprise. It's all like, surprise, here you go, another way to do this. To make a long story short, it was another long labor, and I will tell you, was 9.5 pounds. That was pretty amazing too. But unfortunately, when he was born, he had aspirated meconium and quite a lot of it. So when I delivered him, the NICU team was in the room with me. And when he was born, he was not crying and he was having a hard time breathing. So it's actually very hard to talk about this, but he's fine. Thank God. He is this amazing 11-year-old boy. And you would never think, wow, going through that, thank God babies are so resilient, and there's the medical establishment to help support them, when they're little like that. They took him to the NICU and he was on oxygen. He was under an oxygen tent, and I was not even allowed to hold him for about 48 hours, which is one of the worst experiences of my entire life. And I know the hospital has since renovated and, redone the layout of their rooms and their departments. But when I delivered there, the NICU was several floors down from postpartum and the floor where I was moved to. So what was happening is, in that first day or so, in those first hours, I was in my room, hadn't even held my baby, and I could hear in the next room next door another woman with her crying baby. And all I could think was, oh my gosh, this is like a punishment for something I never did wrong. What a cruel, cruel, cruel thing to hear other new moms with their babies. And mine is in intensive care and I can't even hold him. So that was a really hard experience. Ironically, that hospital had, it was actually a different hospital. I wound up, which is a whole other long story, but my first was delivered by an OB, and then I wound up going to a midwifery practice which I had my next 3 children delivered by midwives who were absolutely amazing. I was in a new hospital and there was a lactation consultant there, and she came to visit me, during those early hours. And she told me, she said, she was sympathetic and she acknowledged how difficult this task was, wanting to breastfeed a baby who was in NICU. She brought me a pump and I started pumping during those early hours immediately. Again, fortunately, when I went back to work part-time with my first, I did have a pump and I did pump at work. So at least a breast pump wasn't a foreign contraption to me, because that is another whole hurdle that women have to overcome. That's something else. You don't grow up learning how to use a breast pump. You know what I mean? It's another learning curve and something that initially feels unusual and, overwhelming. And once you get it down, it becomes, just as habitual as brushing your teeth and flossing.
I always tell moms it becomes your BFF.
Right. Exactly.
But, you brought up a really good point there, in that you said at least you had some comfort level with this plastic machine, the pump,
right,
and you had the knowledge to know that it was a very important part of your postpartum care at this point, to signal to your body that you've had a baby,
right,
and it needs to get that message. Can you imagine the first time mom, you don't have that connection, you've never breastfed a baby even, and you're separated and you get this plastic pump? It was devastating for you, and it's devastating and so foreign. And remember when you talked about with your first baby, everything was just so confusing.
Yep.
And then to not have your baby with you, I'm really, really happy to know that you had a lactation consultant that was sympathetic and brought you in the pump. Because the other thing sometimes with hospital staff is that they're just so used to all of this that I think sometimes they forget that the poor devastated mommy that's separated from her baby, and my goodness, a few floors away, and you're listening to other moms with babies. I'm probably not going to quote you correct, but you said something about it's a cruel joke.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing was she brought me an electric pump, and I had only used manual pumps.
Oh, really?
Because she asked me, is this your first? No. Oh, did you breastfeed your first? Yes. Did you ever use a pump? Yes. What kind? So I told her, well, I always had the Avent pump and the manual pump. And she said, oh no, that's not going to help you, with a NICU baby. And
so she's now happy because she's going to bring you the Mercedes.
Right. And I have to tell you that I hated the electric pump and I wound up using the manual one, even though I was told it was not going to be an efficient thing to rely upon. But I was so comfortable with it that that's what I wound up doing, because when I was discharged from the hospital, and I will say at this point, my son had still not latched on, which was another challenge, because at this point, he's in NICU. They hadn't let him eat for a while. And then when they did, they were giving him bottles. Now, fortunately, I had been pumping just hours after I delivered. So he always got my milk, which was the upshot of all that. And then when I was discharged, so began this very difficult emotional separation and chaotic experience of going home to my daughter, who was a toddler at that point. She wasn't even 2 yet, and dealing, with helping her, and mommy had been gone, and now mommy's exhausted, and where's my baby brother, and all this chaos. But I wound up setting my alarm and getting up every 2 hours, day and night, to pump so that I had enough milk. My husband would bring it up twice a day to the hospital, and I went up every day to see him. And one of the things that I remember so vividly is the NICU nurses who, were really lovely people. But one of them said to me, I see how hard you're trying to nurse him and get him to latch on, but I want you to understand something. And she said to me, he can still be a breastfed baby, but he may be getting your breast milk through a bottle. She said, and I want you to understand that. And I remember thinking, maybe this is the kind of person I am. When someone says to me, basically, no, that might not be possible, I think, yes, it is. Yes, it is possible. And I'm going to prove to you that it is. And the other thing that another nurse told me, which was a really shattering experience too, was because whenever I was visiting him, I wanted so badly to nurse him, and I kept trying. And that was a totally challenging experience too, because they would draw this little curtain around his little bassinet in the NICU, and it was so noisy in there. There were all these beeps and all these sounds.
Right.
And, it's a very, I always say, and to this day, no parent should ever have to be there. No baby should ever go there. And I don't mean that in the sense of, the ones that need it, obviously, thank God we have it, but no one deserves that. No one should have to go through that emotional experience, because it really is a very...
Right. We are incredibly grateful for the wonderful care, the medical technology, the experienced staff taking care of the little ones.
Yep.
And yet what you're speaking to is the emotional side of it, walking into a NICU with all the buzzers and bells and tubes, and seeing your little baby in their bassinet covered, sometimes not even being able to touch them or hold them. I used to say the word stressful, but I think there's even greater words and adjectives to describe that. And I think you're kind of getting to that point, is that no one should ever really have to be there.
Right. It was so tough too, because I remember one of the other nurses telling me, we are very pro-breast milk, she said, but we can't really be pro-breastfeeding in here. We need to measure every ounce that a baby intakes here, because depending on the situations, the intake of food and the weight gain is so critical to so many of the babies. And she said, when you're nursing, we can't be sure of how much he's ingesting. So we really do want them to have the breast milk. That's, paramount, and that's so vital. But you have to understand that it isn't easy for us to have that milk provided to them, from breastfeeding. It's easier for us to see it in a bottle, so we know how much they got. And I remember thinking, I can't believe how hard this all is again. I never saw it coming, but who does?
You've now encountered another major obstacle.
Exactly. And then it got even more difficult, if that's even possible, because once I finally did get him to latch on, which it took over a week. He was there for 10 days, and it took day upon day upon day. And I remember thinking, maybe today's going to be the day he latches on. Maybe tomorrow will be, and I kept thinking that. And finally he did. And finally, thankfully, he was discharged, and we brought him home, and he was fine. But then I discovered that, unlike my first, I had the sleepiest baby in town. And he, unlike my daughter, who only slept for 15 minutes at a stretch, he would sleep, and he'd sleep for 2 and 3 hours, and then he wouldn't get up. And I thought, oh no, it's time to feed him. I need to nurse him. And he would have a really hard time staying awake. And, and so began this whole other journey of undressing him and putting a cool rag under his armpit and tickling his feet and literally trying to keep a baby awake while they're on the breast, which
And are you now thinking I must be in the Twilight Zone?
yes, I mean, it was a very really intense and overwhelming experience for a totally different reason. That I remember thinking, wow, how does this happen? It's always a surprise. It's always a surprise. For those early weeks when he was home, he was this sleepy baby who really needed to be woken up to be fed. And people think that that's a good thing. They'll think, oh, well, you have a baby who sleeps. But no, because the battle of trying to nurse a sleepy baby is excruciating. And anyone who's ever been there knows.
Yeah, it's not normal.
Right.
And the work and effort that you have to put
Yep.
into waking a baby up, like you mentioned, cold cloths, and sometimes it could be a half hour to wake your
Yes.
baby up.
Yes.
And then after all that effort,
Yep.
you put them to the
Yep.
breast, and within a few minutes, they're falling asleep again.
Exactly.
So it's an extraordinary effort to
Yep.
get your baby well fed
Yep.
when they're like that.
And I remember thinking through all of those blurred days and nights, thinking, wow, even when I thought I could never be more tired, I am more exhausted. Where's the point where you don't even know you're more exhausted because you're as exhausted as you can register in your brain, and even if you were more sleep deprived, you wouldn't even know it anymore.
Exactly. One year I went to a Mother Center conference, and at the conference, I don't know who was speaking, but this is years ago, and I talk about it all the time. But they were saying that they feel like sleep deprivation should have a true medical diagnosis, like 868.9
Yes,
sleep deprivation.
absolutely. And of course, during that time, I was already a mom to a toddler. So, that was a whole other dynamic that went on. And it was hard because now you have two children who need you so desperately. And you're trying to go through, the process of breastfeeding a newborn again, who is very sleepy and sluggish. And then, of course, you're recovering again from another, difficult delivery. So one day at a time, and I like to tell my friends too, sometimes they say, you know what, sometimes 1 hour at a time. You can't possibly bite off more than you can chew mentally or emotionally. You just get through the hour. And some of those hours are so hard and overwhelming, but then you realize I got through that and I'm going to get through the next one and the next one. And somehow you do.
Yeah, you did incredible, however, because I think that part of it just definitely has to come from who you are and what you personally are made of
Yes.
in order to persevere. I sometimes use the word stubborn.
Right.
I think that there were times when I was too stubborn for my own good, but it helped me in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about your experiences is that it was so hard. You persevered, and yet you're not having the attitude when you're talking to other women, I did and so could you.
No.
You're having the attitude, I did and I'm going to be here to
Right.
support you. It can be very hard for you too, and I understand. And you're verbalizing that you can easily understand, having been through your experience, how some mothers are just not able to see it through. We are just so tired. Sometimes we don't have the support around us, and
Right.
sometimes we don't even not necessarily need the support per se, because it sounds like you just kept on going. But sometimes people have loved ones really pushing them away from
Right.
it and constantly emotionally battering them, and we just sometimes cannot withstand all that negativity.
Mm-hmm.
And people telling us, you need to feed your baby.
Right. Right.
So there's so much going on. And what I love about your story is that you did have a really, really hard time, and yet you persevered, you succeeded, and yet you still walk away from the experience saying, I could understand why other women would give up.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Taking a little break so I can share this info with you. I am really psyched to be able to share this next piece of news with you. My regular listeners are very familiar at this point with Mom-mentum, the organization that I talk about on each show. You know the one that I say saved my life as a new mother, the organization that helped me find other mothers who were new at this whole mothering thing. They became my people. They helped me navigate navigate that first year of motherhood and continue to mother me as I had more kids and my need for support through their toddler years and kindergarten years and elementary school years just kept being needed. I made lifelong friends, and they were so helpful that I am doing all I can to continue to support the organization. I want Momentum to continue to thrive, and I want you, my All About Breastfeeding audience, to experience just some of what Momentum is all about. The ladies of Momentum have agreed to give my listeners a 14-day trial membership so you can see what this Mother Center thing is all about at no cost to you. Just hop on over to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast. You will see a link from Momentum, it's in blue, and you just click it on and it will bring you to the page for you to sign up for your free trial. Honestly and truly, there's absolutely no cost to you. This is just a great opportunity for you to enjoy the discussion groups and the blogs and webinars and educational pieces that are available for free for you. I will have a link to this in the show notes. And now, back to the show. All right, what I would love to do is I'd love to hear a little bit about your role in Momentum.
Oh, sure.
My audience already knows I've interviewed several moms from Momentum, and I'm totally supporting the organization. I have a little sponsorship that I talk about, and I've already done a show about my early experience with Momentum. And I mentioned to you before that my first Mother Center was somewhere in the vicinity of where you are living,
which is
so we already have a lot in common. Paths not necessarily cross, but we both have spent time in the same area. And I was ever so grateful for finding Mother Center when my baby was 6 months old, and I remember spending just as much time in the parking lot of the church after the group was officially over as I did while I spent that hour to hour and a half in the group when it was officially running and being facilitated. So I'd love for you, if you could just share with me how you found out initially about Mother Center and what your role is now with Mother Center.
Sure, I'd be happy to, as Momentum is a phenomenal organization and I would love to talk about them. So my personal journey with Momentum began in 2010. And this is a great opportunity to mention my younger two children, who I'd feel mommy guilt about if I didn't mention them, and only my older two. So my second daughter is Charlotte, and then my youngest daughter is Jasmine. So Jasmine was about a year old. As you know, I've been a library user and employee for many, many, many years. So my local library here, Middle Country Library, they actually have a Mother Center group. And I was aware of it. I saw it advertised in the program bulletin. So I signed up. And part of it for me, too, was really, I was driven mostly because of my children. At that point, my older two were in school, and I had met a bunch of moms, and had made friends for myself and for my older two children. And they were in school and had friends in school. And I kept thinking, I need to create another group of friends now who have younger children. Many of my friends who had maybe one or two kids, they, they weren't going to mommy and me classes or library programs or going, to the park for a play date anymore. So I knew I needed another set of friends with younger kids. So my goal was to find little friends for Jasmine and Charlotte. So I joined the Mother Center group at the library, and that was in 2010. And it was amazing. Ironically, Jan was the facilitator, and I know you know Jan.
Oh, yes.
Yep. She is a very dear friend and a phenomenal person. So she led the group, and I got everything out of that and then so much more than I could have possibly asked for. I wound up making friends for myself. One of the women I met there is actually my co-leader for one of my Girl Scout troops now, which is really wonderful. And her daughter is very, very good friends with my daughter. I made friends, my kids made friends. I met Jan, and I was then launched on another journey in my life, one with Momentum, because what happened is as the years went by and a lot of the kids started to age out of the group and go to school, I really didn't want to leave, Mom-mentum and the mother center groups. I wanted it to remain a part of my life in some way. And at that point, I had been talking to Jan a lot about becoming a facilitator. And I knew that was something that I really, really wanted. It just felt like a really good fit for me. And it was something that was connected to my work with parents and children and caregivers at the library. So I wound up going to facilitator training. I took the training, and I was fortunate to then eventually be hired as a facilitator at the library to run the group, which I now run there on Monday mornings, which is really great. And then separate, but kind of very much related to that, I became more and more involved with Mom-mentum and the staff, and I went on their annual retreat, which is an absolutely amazing experience. That's the transformative experience that I use those words to birth. And that's one of those experiences where you are at this amazing place where you're connecting with all of these women from various states who are in mother center groups and involved with the organization, and really focusing on all of the things that Mom-mentum is all about, which is, advocacy and the being a mom and supporting the family and supporting the work-life balance and everything that we do as an organization. So I was really fortunate to about a year ago be offered a job with the organization themselves. And I'm really honored to have that position. And I serve as the group development manager. So the key of my position is to be the kind of the conduit and the connector piece, the connecting piece to all of our mother center groups, the ones that we have in various states and the ones on Long Island, and also to help start more groups at libraries and that sort of thing. So
The very first group that you took as a member, do you remember what it was?
the one at Middle Country.
Right.
The way the library groups run is a little bit different from the community centers, the ones that are kind of established with more of a structure.
That I was used to.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, in the library, because the library is hosting the group, we run it usually in 5 to 6 week sessions in the fall, the winter, and the spring. So each 5 to 6 week session, we usually have a new topic each week, and it's very much the discussion group format of the mother centers. So that's how we do that.
So tell me a little bit about the library group, about how many moms are typically in the group.
Okay, so we usually register about 10 to 12 women, and they do attend with their children. Typically, the library will set parameters for, say, moms of children birth to age 3. So that doesn't mean it has to be a first-time mom. I mean, the mom could have 3 kids, and then one of them happens to be, a child aged birth to age 3. So we have the group each week, usually for an hour and a half for a 5 or 6 week session. It's great. We do a lot of fun stuff in the group. I like to look at it as the kind of thing where, the moms are walking into the doorway, and often they are bedraggled and they're exhausted and they're overwhelmed. They're frustrated and they're being pulled in a million directions, or they had a bad night with their kid, or, they're worried about potty training or whatever it is that's going on. And then when they walk out, they feel somewhat rejuvenated and they feel the support, and they know, of paramount importance that they're not alone, that there is another mom and many other moms probably who've been through this, who are going through this, or who will go through this. And it's just an amazing experience where they support each other. They share with each other. We laugh, we cry sometimes. I always have Kleenex available, and the children are there with us, and the children play. The library provides toys and books and puzzles, and it's really great. It's a fun, rewarding, supportive, really refreshing and rejuvenating experience for moms.
So the kids are in the room with you playing on the floor, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you typically have 2 facilitators, right?
We actually usually just have one. It's usually not
Okay.
co-facilitators. It's just one of us. Yeah.
So things have changed. So that's why it's always interesting. Things change and evolve. So, can you tell me a little bit about what the role of the facilitator is?
Sure. I will say that in many of the other groups that are established and, using space in other places, they do sometimes have co-facilitators. So that model is definitely still used. In the library setting, typically it's just the one facilitator. And what the facilitator does, I always hesitate to call us leaders because it's easy to say we're quote leading the group and to use that verb, but the better verb really is facilitating, because what we want to do and what we strive to do is facilitate discussion and facilitate sharing and facilitate compassion and understanding and acceptance. And that's really what we're serving as. I think the best times I work, in a group and are facilitating a group is when the women are talking much, 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 much more than I am. And I laugh because, as you can see, it's quite easy for me to talk. but but the goal of the group, it isn't for me to sit there and to either tell them it's going to be okay, even though I have done that. Believe me, I mean, we've all done that, and the other moms will do that too sometimes. But it isn't about me dispensing advice or telling my war stories or anything like that. It's about me serving as the person who can just pose a contemplative question or an activity. We do a lot of really neat, fun activities where in the beginning of the groups, they're more getting to know you and icebreaker types activities. And then as the group goes on, we'll do more, all sorts of other things. Like one example, one of my favorites is I have these cartoons that deal with birth stories and birthing experiences, and they're all really quite funny. And I'll have them all laid out on a table, and the women come in and I say, pick one that resonates with you, pick one that speaks to you. And then we'll go around the room and they'll each share why she chose that cartoon. The idea is to have the moms really talk and share with each other, to have the children become friends, to have the moms become friends, and then for them to build connections in their community. And ideally, the most beautiful things that come out of it sometimes are, the families getting together, the moms going, they have moms night outs together, they share childcare assistance sometimes. There's been cases where they've actually given jobs to each other, and provided networking opportunities. So it's just really a wonderful experience.
You also mentioned going to the retreat. And is that a retreat like where you meet with other board members?
It's actually, the board members sometimes do attend, but it's really for the members, the Mom-mentum members, the moms themselves. And
oh, great.
Yeah, and we plan a weekend long agenda of activities and presentations and all sorts of things for the moms. And it's really just a phenomenal experience. It's one of the perks of being a Mom-mentum member. And it's something that, it's a really valuable experience for everybody involved.
And I'm sure you really look forward to that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was a board member for quite a few years, and we would meet once a year on like a weekend, like a Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And of course, I do not remember the church either, but it was somewhere up on the North Shore. And I remember, in a very, very good way, being very overwhelmed with all of the people who flew in from all over the United States, who were all volunteer and so committed to making the organization better.
Mm-hmm.
And the weekend was just filled with a flurry of ideas,
Right.
brainstorming. And by the end of the weekend, we were so mentally exhausted, but thrilled with what we had accomplished. And it was a way for me to kind of fill myself back up after all the many, many hours of volunteering, now spending time with other women who were looking at another part of the organization and how to grow and how to make it better. So it was wonderful. I was also part of the conference committee for quite a few years. So I started off like you, then I became a facilitator. I did lots of fundraising and all the other committees, and then was involved in the board. So I was like you too. When I reached a certain point, I realized, that's why I giggled. I don't know if you heard that, but I was like, I'm not ready to give this up yet. So I became a facilitator, and it's like the best thing ever. Are you the person that the public, the mom, when they call Momentum to find out how do I start a group here, are you the person that they connect with?
We're a small but mighty group of people, of women involved in the organization, as Kate Fineski would say. I definitely help with pieces of that, but we also have, and I know you've met Brandy virtually, so to speak. She also
Yeah.
does a lot of the start a group work and helps women who want to start groups. So we're really a great team, and we all do work together, and certain aspects start to crisscross, so to speak. People who initially call or email us or contact us, moms who want to start a group or people who want to see a group in their community, depending on where they want the group or what is available, they may wind up talking to Brandy, Kate, myself, or all of us, or Jan, depending on what happens.
All right, this is great. I've interviewed several other mothers from Momentum and group members, and with each interview that I talk to moms, I elicit a little bit more information about the organization for my listeners to get a really good grasp of what Momentum is about. And I'm always learning because it has evolved and changed, and I make some assumptions about it. So I appreciate you going into depth about Momentum, and I thank you for that.
Sure.
I would like to end with you sharing just one piece of words of wisdom that I always say, if you could go back and put your arms around your newly postpartum self with your first baby and whisper one thing in your ear, what words of wisdom would you tell yourself?
It's hard to pick one thing. I think one of the things I would say, especially in light of the conversations we've had today, is, as trite as it may sound, really believe in your intuition. Listen to the voice inside your heart and inside your head. Remember what you saw, things being, and know that it may not be that, because it might not be able to be that, but that it might still be possible, even if you have people telling you it can't and it isn't. That's one piece of it. And I think, too, at the core of all of us as moms is the love we have for our baby. And that's something that's bigger than any challenge or anything else that we wind up being faced with. And that's something that our children know and our babies know, whether we can or can't breastfeed them, whether, whatever decisions we make along the way, because that's just the first of many, 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 many decisions and challenges. As long as we remember that love is something they feel, that's really important, and that we need to be loved too. We need to be, we're very hard on ourselves, and that's another topic for another second, but we really are. And
but we sure are hard on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that up and highlighting that what's most important is that we need love, and the unconditional love that as parents we have, as mothers we have for our babies. And that's like the head of everything else that goes on in our parenting life, right?
Absolutely.
Beautifully said, Christine. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Can you share with us your email address in case anybody would like to contact you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's C Farrugia, that's C, F as in Frank, ARRUGIA, at MOM-mentum, MENTUM.org.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know I kept you longer. This is probably going to be a part 1 and part 2 show, but I just loved everything that you had to share. As always, with some of my guests, I'm like, we could talk for about 5 more hours, but I do have to let you go on to your day. You're a busy mom, and I very, very much appreciate you taking the time to be with us here at All About Breastfeeding. Thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you, Lori. Have a wonderful day.
You too. And that's it for our show today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope you're enjoying the shows. iTunes makes it so easy for you to get all the previous and upcoming shows. Just go to iTunes and search for All About Breastfeeding and subscribe to the show. As promised, I am now offering several ways that we can connect with each other. I talk to mothers all the time after they have given birth. Many have said they would have liked the opportunity to talk with me before their baby was born so they could go over certain things that may have been troubling them about breastfeeding. You have many questions about your own health, medication you're taking, and how it might impact breastfeeding, or perhaps about your breast and nipple anatomy. Perhaps you have fears or anxieties about breastfeeding, and you feel it will be helpful to talk it out before your baby's born. Some mothers just have a bunch of questions that could not be answered in your regular breastfeeding class because of time or privacy. These are just some of the many reasons you will want to have a Skype consult with me. Talking things through can help you clear the way emotionally for an excellent start with breastfeeding. All you need to do is go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/Skype to schedule your online prenatal consult. Next up to talk about, I finally have all the pieces in place and our online breastfeeding mothers group is ready to go. I know how hard it can be in the last trimester just waiting to give birth, looking forward to holding your baby in your arms for the first time, and the excitement building as you look forward to breastfeeding your baby. How great would it be for you to hang out with other pregnant moms and new mothers? Pregnant moms get to find out what new motherhood is like and what newborn breastfeeding is like from brand new moms. And the brand new moms get to talk about all your breastfeeding stuff and ask all your questions about normal newborn breastfeeding. What I have is a virtual online breastfeeding mothers group where you sign on once a week to meet and chat with other mothers who are going through similar experiences as you are. You become friends and support each other. I will be facilitating the group, so you know there's always an experienced lactation consultant ready to jump in and answer your questions and make sure the information is accurate. If you would like to be part of 10 mothers who will meet once a week virtually for 8 weeks to talk all about your breastfeeding stuff, just check out allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/support. You will find out more detailed information on the group's start dates and prices and how it all works. I really am excited and I look forward to meeting with you on Google Hangout and getting to know each other.